Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Susanna Doyle, and I'm the Alumni Relations Manager at Trinity Development and Alumni. You're all very welcome to this week's Inspiring Ideas at Trinity webinar in connection with the Career Services Department at Trinity College. Today, we are delighted to welcome three experts on career development and labor trends. With us, we have Orla Bannon, who is the Director of Careers at Trinity College, Claire McGee, who is the Head of Innovation and Education Policy at IBEC, and Siobhán O'Shea, who is the Client Services Director at CPL, as well as the Chair of the Dublin Regional Skills Forum. Before we get started, if you are watching today on Zoom, you can enter and exit the full screen mode using the button on the top right of your screen. You can adjust the audio settings on the bottom left of your screen. If you need to leave the webinar, you can click the button on the bottom right of your screen. And if you'd have any questions to ask the speakers, please use the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen, and our speakers will do their best to get to all of your questions during the Q&A section of the webinar. And you're welcome to ask questions throughout the webinar. You don't need to wait towards the end. If you're watching today on YouTube Live, you can adjust the audio settings again using the circled button there on your screen. You can share the webinar. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. And again, if you have any questions, please use the live chat feature, and our speakers will do their best to answer as many of those questions as possible. The webinar today will finish up just at about 2 o'clock. There will be a few presentations by our speakers, after which there will be a Q&A session of about 15 to 20 minutes. And we will be recording today's video. So if you do need to leave at any time, you can watch back on YouTube. So now I would like to introduce the Director of Careers, Orla Bannon. Orla is the director here at Trinity. She has the responsibility for managing the scale and quality of academic and student engagement with careers, as well as partnerships with employers to deliver a truly world-class career service at Trinity. She provides leadership to the careers team, promotes the value of the career service across the university, and acts as a center of expertise, advising and contributing to the university's objectives in terms of employability and skills development, as well as the wider student experience. Orla holds a degree in biochemistry from Trinity, an MBA from UCSD RCSI, and a diploma in personal management from NCI. She has over 20 years of management experience in both the public and private sectors in areas such as healthcare, higher education, IT, and publishing. So let me hand over to Orla.
Thanks very much for that, Susanna, and welcome everyone to our discussion today, where we're going to really look at career development in a COVID-19 world. Some of the things we're going to touch on are to look at the challenges and opportunities that are there for all of us at different stages in our career development and the impact that COVID-19 has had on that. Some of the areas we're going to look at are the future of work, what businesses are doing now across the various sectors. We're going to explore some skills for the new workplace and changes in recruitment practices. And we'll also give some advice on what you can be doing now to take control of your career. So to start us off, I'd like to welcome Claire McGee to give our first presentation. She'll then be followed by Siobhán O'Shea. So Claire is the Head of Education and Innovation Policy at IBEC. Her role is to promote the business sector's priorities for supporting and developing the education system to respond to the changing world of work and society, and to boost Ireland's capacity for innovation. Her work has a strong emphasis on promoting better investment in research and greater industry education engagement to develop the necessary skills of the future. A key priority for Claire in 2020 is to champion the necessity of lifelong learning backed by public supports and a responsive education and training system to enable people to gain employability skills and opportunities. So I'd like to hand over to Claire.
Thank you very much, Orla. I'll just start to share my screen here. with my slides, if I can do that quite easily. Let's just see if that will allow me to do it. Share. Now, so thank you very much for the opportunity, Orla, to be with you here today. I think this is such a topical and very interesting discussion point. The future of work is one of my favorite topics to discuss, but now we have 6 months on the challenge of COVID-19. And really what I wanted to kind of maybe bring together is how that discussion around the future of work is much closer than we think, and how COVID-19 and the impacts of that global health pandemic has had a major impact on every facet of Irish business and global business. So thinking about work and how the workplace is changing, if we think about all the major innovations over the last 10 years, some of them even coming from Trinity College itself. So thinking like things like artificial intelligence, cloud computing, even battery life in terms of our mobile phones or our laptops, even our battery life for our the way we'll be driving our electronic vehicles quite soon, smartphone technology, social media communications. So all of these new inventions and innovations over the last 10 years have now become very much mainstream and have found their way into the world of work, and therefore requiring a different type of skill set than what industry may have traditionally have sought. So they're taking, I suppose, they're really having a major impact on how we live our professional and our personal lives. So that was always happening. And I think maybe the future of work was probably looking over about a 5 to 10 year horizon for major disruption within the workplace. Along came COVID-19 and the impact of that, and we have seen significant disruption across all industries over the last 6 months. And while we may see this solely as a public health emergency in the initial early weeks of it, it then very quickly also became a social and an economical kind of situation as well. And as I've just pointed out here, everybody's lives have been impacted by COVID-19, and that is having a major impact on the way we work. So first of all, from a business perspective, the way customers and consumers are now thinking about their buying decisions has completely changed. And those decisions behind what we buy, when we buy, are having an impact on our economy. As a result, businesses are now having to realign their strategy and their supply chain. They're having to have major new investments in technology, and that's having major pressure then on their finance and their ability to fund that. So all of which, again, is impacting on their workforce and their people. So, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what Siobhán is going to say around kind of the new skills that are going to be required within this new world of work as we try to manage the future of work and the rising role of technology and digitalization and those changing behaviors, and how do we manage that then within the context of COVID. So I suppose, and to be brief around it, I think COVID-19 has fundamentally made us rethink where we work, how we work, and indeed why we work. And some individuals are even kind of questioning, what's my role here and why do I do it? So big issues up for debate at the moment. I just wanted to kind of talk to you then about the, just moving on to my next slide here, if that's possible. Yeah, here we go. Just about the, I suppose, business in the economy at present. And COVID-19 has presented many challenges, but also some opportunities. And this is something we need to be very mindful about the labour market at the moment. Initially, a lot of my colleagues, particularly those with the economics experience, were speaking about a V-shaped recovery. So there'd be a very dramatic kind of drop in economic activity, then with a sharp kind of recovery. That's now looking a little bit more like a K-style recovery. And what you're seeing is some sectors within the economy are remaining very buoyant and actually increasing their activity. And then equally, what you're seeing is some sectors are very much struggling. So like the hospitality or even the experience sector. And then you're having kind of challenges within different sectors. So take retail, for example. Supermarket retail is very buoyant at the moment, but then other elements of the retail industry are struggling. Many of those who might be in, I suppose, high streets or shops in town centres. So big challenges within sectors. And then we're also seeing that at an individual level. We're seeing those individuals who have a high level of a higher education attainment have been able to withstand some of the challenges presented by COVID-19, and then other individuals who perhaps have less education attainment and skills have been more disenfranchised from the workforce because of the nature of their type of work. So we've kind of got recovery at a business level and an individual level kind of mirroring each other. And that's something, again, for our education system to be mindful of. So a lot of uncertainty around cost containment and how to manage that. I mentioned the strategy realignment. The other element I just want to bring to people's attention here is around the interconnectedness of industries. And it's something to be very kind of, when you're thinking about your careers and moving into different industry sectors, technology is bringing more and more sectors closer together. And again, COVID-19 has had a major impact on how some arms of certain sectors have performed incredibly well and others less so. And one impact in one industry can have a very detrimental impact in another industry. Again, I take maybe Trinity as a good example of this because of the impact of social distancing measures. Trinity, for example, aren't able to kind of maybe carry out their summer music series this year. And I'm sure that has had a bit of an impact on your, I suppose, your environment, for example. And that's because even though we wouldn't think of you as being maybe in that entertainment or that experience or hospitality industry, but nonetheless, this measure is having an impact on your business per se. The other couple of opportunities that I think are quite important are around the opportunity for increased innovation, increased productivity, increased technological adoption, and also personal development opportunities. And what you're seeing is the opportunity for many people to stretch themselves and be part of new teams. And I think there's some positive opportunities about that. I'm looking forward to hearing what Siobhán has to say about it. A couple of points I'd like to just bring your attention to. So in IBEC, we survey our business members quite frequently, and this is one of our more recent one from May. We currently have a survey around business sentiment in the field at the moment. So maybe in about 6 or 8 weeks' time, I might have more updates on this. I'm happy to come back and have another conversation about it. But I think this survey that was with our most recent HR, or the most senior HR contacts, is quite interesting as a backdrop of some of the thoughts or the challenges that HR managers are currently experiencing. And I won't go into them in major detail. They're really just here as I suppose, as a guide. But what we've noticed, obviously, is a major shift radically and rapidly to remote working. And over the last, maybe the first 4 months of COVID-19, you had many businesses focusing on the now. How do they focus on business continuity, meeting their current contracts or their current kind of, I suppose, supply chain arrangements, while also mobilizing a remote workforce? Now what you're seeing is maybe a major change within the HR system is around focusing on what's going to happen next for the business. So many businesses now are looking at more flexible working arrangements, but again, this is not how maybe those businesses would have wanted to have introduced, I suppose, those flexible working arrangements. And because it was so quick and maybe a little bit dirty at the beginning, we're now trying to bed down into a more kind of business continuity and supporting people who may have struggled with working from home. And that's another challenge for us. So HR and hiring managers are trying to kind of balance, I suppose, some of the challenges that individuals have been having over the last 6 months, while all the time planning for the future. So these are some of the more kind of changes that businesses are trying to introduce. These are the type of I suppose, support strategies that businesses are currently introducing to help teams and to help managers. But I think that the takeaway for me from this, and hopefully for yourselves as well, is looking at what type of mindset or skill set that managers and mentors are going to have in the future to be able to deal with more frequent online team meetings, more frequent one-to-one meetings. And therefore, it's all around those personal leadership skills that we're going to probably see come to the fore a little bit more. And leadership skills are going to become really, really, really important into the future. Again, we're now seeing work-life balance come to the fore a little bit more. And a big priority for business was ensuring that employees availed of their annual leave and making sure that there was a proper opportunity to disconnect from work, focus on your personal time so that you were ready, rested, and then to be able to focus back on work again. And again, striking that balance is a huge risk for business at the moment. There's a risk of burnout amongst many employees, and you will see that many employers are now currently investing in employee well-being, employee engagement programs to make sure that people are looking after themselves so that they're able to give their best then when their time comes to be at work. I thought this was quite interesting. Again, it's to show this interconnectedness of the workplace at the moment and how that has a major impact on other industries. So 54% of employees of our survey are now based working remotely or working away from the office. So that's going to have a major impact on transport options, fuel sales, things like, your local cafe, maybe even your local hairdresser. And so just bearing in mind, I suppose, the fact now that we're working remotely, we're probably shopping online, what's the impact of that from our local kind of high street, our shopping centre, all of the impact of that. So how does that kind of looking at new opportunities for different businesses in the future, and how do they remain relevant, and how do they remain connected to their I suppose customers and then to their employees. I also thought this was quite an interesting one in terms of national and international travel and what are employers' kind of perspectives on travel into the future. I think it's really interesting in terms of time allocation. Ireland is a small nation. We were incredibly mobile. And if you look at, I suppose, the flight routes in and out of Dublin Airport, there was a lot of kind of business people traveling to kind of fulfill kind of meeting obligations externally. That's now fundamentally changed. So how will people in the future build new relationships so that we can make sure that Ireland still remains a very kind of export orientated nation? And these are things that are neat, while they're not very obvious, but they're very important factors in terms of business planning and strategizing over the future. So it's an interesting sidebar, I think, just around how time is now being allocated, how is it freeing up people maybe to look at different types of projects, and then how is work then being distilled, through, I suppose, the organization, when people are not spending a huge amount of time in airports, on planes, in cars, on trains, and how then has work fundamentally changed because of that. I think this is a key slide as well, just focusing on learning and development needs. I always have a major concern when we enter maybe periods of cash containment or business containment, concern that maybe organizations may cut their learning and development budgets because it's a simple way of managing things like that. But what we've noticed is that a lot of employers now are really focused on supporting people to kind of grow into that leadership role or people management. And you're seeing a lot more investment in business intelligence, technology, and then the skill set that's going to be required around that. So very happy to see that many companies are still continuing to invest in personal development and learning. And if there's a takeaway here from this, these are obviously the areas that they're looking for people within that skill set. And I'm sure we'll touch on this a little bit later on. But just the last thing for me before we maybe move into a broader conversation and the key messages. Business is undergoing a challenging period at the moment, but it will find its feet. September is a very interesting month for Irish business because we're going to see just a little bit of a change to some of the supports that the government have been providing over the last couple of months. And therefore you're seeing how businesses are going to respond to that in terms of their economic output, their new strategies, how they're going to innovate into the future. So 2021, 2022 is going to be very, very interesting in terms of how does the dust settle around all of this and what will the legacy issues be. But what I would like to kind of point out businesses take a long-term view, and we should also take a long-term view. Careers are now spanning over 50 years. So if you're a recent graduate from Trinity College Dublin, your career potentially could see you into your kind of early 70s, for example. So I don't want to put this down to a blip. There will be major legacy issues, but again, it's not the end of something before it's just started. The key point to note here is that businesses that are most agile, more resilient, and more innovative will perform the best, not necessarily the largest business. It'll be those who are the most adaptable and those that have invested in technology and innovation will perform the best. And the same can be said about the individuals who work for them. And we must remember that people are very much at the heart of a vibrant economy and a vibrant society, even with all the new technological developments. So our focus, and from an IBEC perspective, our key message to government at the moment, how do we support getting people, supporting as many people in work and back to work to focus on their kind of employability opportunities and to help them to develop those employability skills. Orla, I'll hand it back to you and look forward to a more in-depth discussion later on.
Thanks very much for that, Claire. That was very interesting to hear. I'm very interested in this case file recovery. That's the first time I've heard that mentioned, so it's quite interesting to hear. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions on that later. You touched there on some of the skills that are needed for the workplace of the future. And so Siobhán, I'd like to welcome Siobhán O'Shea. And Siobhán is going to talk a little bit more about this area. Just a bit of background on Siobhán. She's the Client Services Director with CPL, which is Ireland's largest talent solutions organisations. And she also heads up the Diversity and Inclusion for CPL's Future of Work Institute. Siobhán has over 18 years experience of recruitment and talent leadership experience in Ireland, combined with 7 years experience in New York and San Francisco. She's on the board of directors of Dublin Chamber, and she leads the Chamber's Labour Task Force. She is also the chair of the Dublin Regional Skills Forum, where I also sit with her on that, which is a Department of Skills initiative. And she's previously held a number of leadership roles with Morgan McKinley. And Siobhán has a Bachelor of Commerce from UCD, and she's a qualified executive coach. But Siobhán's here with us today to talk a little bit about skills. So I'll hand over to you, Siobhán.
Many thanks, Orla, for the introduction. So I might just start by sharing my slides, and I'll kick off my discussion piece. So just to make sure that they can be seen there. Great. So what I'll talk about is really over the next 10 minutes is maybe some of the trends that we're seeing from a recruitment and talent acquisition perspective in the current climate, what the trends are in the marketplace, why it's important now to be upskilling consistently and how you can go about that, some ideas and suggestions, and then some other trends that we're seeing that have been really shaped as a result of this pandemic crisis. So in terms of, and that can vary from, what Claire mentioned about the new where we work, how we work, is going to change dramatically and may have done anyways, but has been all accelerated as a result of the COVID crisis. So what we're seeing right now in the current climate, I suppose, is we've gone from a situation, as mentioned by Claire and by Orla, where we went from full employment back in January, a very buoyant economy, talent shortages in respect of a lot of sectors in the economy, so particularly areas like technology, pharma, healthcare, all were experiencing talent needs that they couldn't meet. And then within a very short and rapid period, we went from a period of nearly 5% unemployment to our worst ever as a result of the pandemic, with people being siloed and furloughed and have not being able to work, where it shot up to nearly 26%. But thankfully, we're seeing in the last couple of months that a lot of employers are back to work, back to business. Over 400,000 people have come off the PUP payment, which is really a positive message from a labour market perspective. All of those people are back working again. But certainly what we are seeing overall is that the climate that would have existed early in the year, where it was very much a candidate-driven climate, has changed. And it now really, employers have a lot more choice when it comes to talent hiring and, you know, opportunities, I suppose, to engage with a breadth of talent across the country that may have opened up and become available as a result of the crisis. So the second trend, I think, that is really going to change, I suppose, the world of work into the future, and we've already seen it happen literally overnight, is this engagement in respect of remote working. And I think the Microsoft CEO, Satya Nadella, put it really well in that 2 years worth of transformation took place in 2 months. And we would have even seen that in our own business in CPL. We employ over 1,000 people, and literally overnight, it was actually 1,100 people overnight went to a remote working situation. So what this means is our business has seen how productive our employees can be, even when they're working from home. So we're not alone in that respect. Other organizations are the same. And the consequence of that is that you're going to see a future shift in terms of how people work in a hybrid way. People will probably never return to working in an office 5 days a week because they've seen that the opportunity there is to do a blended approach. So I think even in terms of, depending on where you are at in your career, if you're a new graduate, it's something to take into consideration that if you're starting out in your first job, you may be a virtual employee. And what does that mean for you in terms of how you engage with your colleagues? You know, adjusting to that new cultural world when you are remote working, and trying to, I suppose, adapt to that, because that is a significant change for us all, for everybody. And then I suppose, while I'm mentioning graduates, I think, you know, I would take it as incredibly positive that a lot of the employers that we work with in CPL are continuing to proceed with all of their plans for graduate programs, and we work with a significant number of the kind of professional services firms and industry clients, financial services companies that would all engage in graduate recruitment. And you know, many of those organizations would have seen that in the last recession, by halting hiring and graduate hiring, it had a huge knock-on impact 3 to 5 years down the line when they didn't have that talent ready to step into more senior roles. So I think generally what we're seeing is that it's quite positive for graduates, but certainly in terms of what has happened is all those part-time jobs and part-time work that would have been very much engaged in by younger people has very much dried up. And I mean, the numbers we're seeing that are coming through from the CSO will kind of confirm that as well. And overall, the workforce participation rate is down. It's actually the lowest it's been since 1998, in the high 50s at 58%. And particularly, we're seeing a knock-on impact for women in the workforce, where it's taken a more significant drop back than for males. So it'll be interesting to see how that will impact the makeup of our labour market as we head into the next couple of years, and we need to watch for that from a diversity and inclusion perspective also. So moving on, I suppose, and it links very much into how you can stay career ready, and both for opportunities that you may be looking to step into, or if you're very much out in the job market for your first time ever. The importance of upskilling can't be overstated. And I think it's very much reflected in the investment that has been put in by the government over recent years, long before COVID, actually, in fact, in investing in opportunities to support people both in employment who are unemployed or are just looking to upskill and reskill, and to offer out plenty of mechanisms in which they can do that. For example, there are over 11,000 places in the Springboard courses that have been made available to people this year. So, what that does then, you can see here, I've outlined some of the benefits of engaging in ways of taking on maybe new technical knowledge or improving your transversal skills. So those soft skills that are more vital than ever. Claire mentioned it there, your ability to be resilient, the ability to collaborate, and strong communication. All of those are skills that are more invaluable than ever to employers. And I think employers, it's shown that it really does, I think there's a percentage of about 55% advantage to having evidence of upskilling on your CV versus not having any. So it really does raise your profile when it comes to coming on radar for employment. If you've really shown that you've embraced lifelong learning, that you're constantly looking to develop your skills. And I suppose it's important to note, we do a lot of work on this through our Future of Work Institute, that roles are becoming redundant all the time. They're becoming obsolete as part of just the nature of the evolution of the fourth industrial revolution. So we need to be constantly refreshing our skills. It's no longer okay to just receive your degree and think that you're done with learning for the rest of your life. That's just not how it works anymore. So if you want to move on, to move into progressive roles, if you want to try and enhance your skill set, you need to be looking at ways to do that. And there's a wealth of information on the Department of Business and Enterprise website around all the options that are available out there, equally on the Regional Skills Forum website. And I know our Dublin Regional Skills Forum, Natasha, is constantly looking at ways to help support people. So there's plenty of opportunity to, embrace new ways of learning and to embrace new skills. So I greatly encourage that. In fact, I'm doing a course myself at the moment, and I'm really enjoying the experience, not the exams, but definitely the learning. So this is a slide that basically I have referred to over the last couple of years. And I think it's particularly interesting to see, because it is a slide that was created 3 to 4 years ago, that, what has moved up in terms of those soft skills and what's important now, and what they would have predicted would be important in 2020. I think many of us would agree has certainly proven to be correct in this pandemic climate. So if you look at skills like creative thinking, people management, it continues to be incredibly important in the top 5. Critical thinking has moved up to number 2. And certainly I think in terms of how people have had to adapt and think outside the box and how they approach keeping people in employment or helping kind of redeploy people who've lost their jobs, would really indicate that this is an important skill for the future. I think one of the ones that I would note on this, that in terms of skills development that came onto the radar, and I think again from a leadership perspective has proven to be really crucial, both in our business leaders, in politics, and in our global leaders, is emotional intelligence. And when we see a lack of it, it can really turn us off. And it's one that didn't even feature in 2015. So it just goes to show that empathy, emotional intelligence, being able to relate to people, and really, I suppose, lean into the fact that it's an incredibly difficult time for nearly everybody right now in some capacity is struggling with something. So these are all skills that you will absolutely need. Even though active listening hadn't made it into the 2020, we've seen it come back with a vengeance. And I think the reason why that's so important more than ever in 2020 is because we've all moved to this virtual working, remote working. You don't have that same opportunity to engage with your colleagues face to face, and that can create a lot of challenge. And it can be hard for people's mental well-being as well. We're as human beings, we like that social interaction, and we're missing that to the same extent that we would have experienced it in the past. So some of the skills that leaders do need in this climate were outlined really well, I felt, by leadership guru called Dana Brownlee. It's a Forbes article, and I'd highly recommend a read of it. And she would have said and reiterated there, I suppose, that empathy piece, that these are some of the core skills that we need to see visible more than ever. And so if you apply that to yourself, no matter what stage you're at in your career, in some capacity, we're all leading in some shape or form. And how we're behaving and how we're leading ourselves through this will really shape and form, how we survive it, basically. So, I mean, you often hear the line, your attitude is your altitude. And I think it's being about to flexing that flexibility, that adaptability and resilience to be able to navigate what's an incredibly difficult journey. A lot of people who are considering maybe taking an opportunity to step up are understanding that, if they take on people management, that they're now having to manage people in a whole new way, remotely, hybrid teams, and really trying to understand the challenges that can bring you, and what are you doing to skill yourself up to be able to engage with that, and all the new technologies that are out there, and that are new ones coming through all the time, every day. In fact, I think, something that would make our IT director and CPL very happy is the fact that they spent 2 or 3 years trying to get us all as a group to engage in Microsoft Teams as a technology tool. And there was a lot of resistance from people who had just really couldn't embrace the change. And suddenly overnight, everybody's on Microsoft Teams and using it. So I think that applies in so many ways to skills across every sector, across every specialization, no matter what you do. If you're an engineer, if you're an accountant, you know, all of these are skills that will stand to you and help you navigate through this period, you know, as well as can be done. So just to cover, I suppose, a couple of trends around the new world that we're in from a recruitment perspective. Many of us, when we go for interviewing now, we will be experiencing our first time of doing a virtual interview. It can be really uncomfortable. It can be really challenging for people who just prefer that face-to-face contact. So it's really important that you prepare yourself up for that. And we've loads of tools on our CPL website. We have an interview pack and tons of information on our careers section that can help support you through that, because it can be a little bit scary, but I can't emphasize enough the importance of doing out some mock virtual interviews with either recruitment consultants, and I'm sure any of our team will be happy to support you, or with people in your network or close to you. So you can pick up on any tics or any habits that you have that need ironing out ahead of doing an interview, because it's, you know, it's a lot. There's lots of pros and cons to it. The great thing is you can keep your cheat notes beside you, and you have loads of little post-its that you can put all over the place to help keep you on track and make sure you sell yourself optimally, and that you cover all the great things that are your unique selling points, your achievements, your education, and all of those things that make you be the one that they should employ. So that is an advantage. But just remember too that there has been a complete veer towards competency-based interviewing too. So having loads of examples of everything, you know, where you demonstrated skills like communication, where you took initiative, examples of collaboration, project work, all of those types of things. It's a lot harder now because we're not in situations where we're able to network the way we might have done in the past. And in Ireland, it is a very small networked community. So when we don't have that opportunity and we're relying on this virtual way of selling ourselves, it can, for some people, be a lot more challenging, and particularly depending on your personality profile too. If you're more extroverted or more introverted, all those things need to be taken into account. But be reassured that most employers are very aware of how this change can be so challenging for people. So they really are trying to engage any of their prospective employees or anyone they're interviewing in a more conversational approach. Don't be lulled by that. It's still an interview. And you know, whilst they are trying to put you at ease and make it as comfortable a process as possible, ultimately they're still trying to get the best talent for their team. So don't forget that at the same time. And if you do need more help in respect of anything around interviews, how to put a good CV together, what to cover in a CV, the essentials, the do's and don'ts. I just have a slide up there with links to our toolkits, which are very comprehensive and will give you a really good foundation to help you get that nice opportunity. And then just in terms of you want to find out more about how long jobs will last or more about the future work, we have a ton of white papers on our website as well. That is me.
That's great, Siobhán. Thanks a million for all of that. Very insightful. And I can see some questions starting to come through in relation to some of the things you discussed there. So we'll come back to those in a minute. But just to kind of finish up the presentation piece, I just have a couple of slides that I just would like to go through. So I'm just going to share these. If I can. So I think what I just want to talk about a little bit is about the labour market, and Siobhán touched on that a little bit there. I suppose I'm very much coming from the graduate employment market and what it's looking like, but we are picking up a lot of feelings from employers about where they're going with their recruitment over the next while. So it is, as Siobhán said, quite a mixed picture that many employers are finding it difficult to plan for the future. And I think, as Claire mentioned earlier on, it is a very different time than it was back in 2008. So I think initially at the start of this, a lot of employers said, well, what did we do in 2008? And you know, how did we respond to that? But it's actually very, very different now. They are responding to that, and some sectors, as I said, are being impacted more than others. You know, the recent focus, the Department of Enterprise, Business and Innovation just last week published a report on 16 different sectors and how they're responding to COVID-19. And we can see very high demand in healthcare, education, pharma, medtech, ICT and financial services. And there's actually a growth there in those areas. You know, it's not evenly spread, as Claire and Siobhán both alluded to. There's a lot more government support available than there was in 2008. So that is helping certain sectors to grow and is sustaining some sectors as well. We're also seeing a lot of collaboration across sectors. You know, it was mentioned there that in sometimes there was a stop of the hire to be able to, some employers stopped hiring because they just didn't feel they could develop that further. But what's happening now is you're finding employers and sectors actually working together so that they can see. Sorry, I'm just aware that there's an issue with the sharing of my screen, so I'm just going to try and rectify this. I hope that that's okay there. Sorry about that, just an issue with the screen there. So I think what's happening in some sectors is they are kind of seeing that maybe some companies within the sector are not in a position to hire at the moment, but what other companies within the sectors are hiring to keep the talent pipelines going for the future, so that what happened in 2008 doesn't happen again. As Claire said at the beginning, there's a complete reimagining of talent management about what work is done, by whom, and where it gets done. And I think that that is something that, you know, those who are hiring are really thinking about and really looking at every role that they have and repurposing and restructuring a lot of roles to meet the changes that COVID-19 has brought about. One of the areas we have seen a big change in is global opportunities, that a lot of employers, you know, internationally now are becoming much more attractive. You know, a lot of the time, you know, you had to look at your own personal circumstances. I can't apply for a job in Australia because I'll have to go and live in Australia to work. Whereas now with virtual working and a lot of jobs going virtually, the opportunity to apply for jobs overseas is there. So the whole global opportunity space has opened up because of the move to virtual working. Siobhán referenced it there, and it's obviously having a big impact on our students and on a lot of sectors of society is the impact on part-time working employment opportunities. And unfortunately, that's the one area that has taken a hit. So we'll be very much looking at that space to see where new opportunities can be created in that area, and maybe where there can be more part-time virtual opportunities in certain sectors where that might be possible too. Siobhán alluded to it there, and it's something that I think we all need to look at in terms of, you know, our recent grads in particular are about the funded HCI and Springboard programs that are available, which government funding is available to support, and they're also available to those in employment. So it's quite a mixed picture at the moment, and I think, you know, I think the underlying theme is uncertainty. But there are definitely jobs out there. I mean, from a career service perspective, we're running 4 careers fairs now in October, and we've had a lot of high level of sign up from employers. We're still actively recruiting. So just to rest assured for students and recent grads, there is a lot of recruitment still going on, but it is unevenly spread across the sectors. And I suppose that's something that everyone needs to think about in terms of career transitioning. If you're in a sector that maybe is being negatively impacted by COVID, you know, how can I reskill, retrain and move into a different sector that maybe is growing? So what I just want to finish up on from my side, it's just about taking control of your career and just some key pieces of advice. A lot of this is common sense, but sometimes it's good to put it down and just look at it again and go through it. So we talked a lot there about expanding your connections, and if anything's, you know, moving to online has actually opened up some networks to people that maybe weren't available before. Everyone is much more focused on being online and having an online presence. So that does make networking online a little bit easier. As Siobhán said, though, there are skills to that. So, you know, people really need to practice that. And one of the things that we're strongly encouraging for our students, but I think is actually really, really valuable for all of us, is the role of mentoring now, and using this time to seek out mentors who can really help us as we look to progress our careers. In Trinity, we have an alumni to student mentoring program that the Careers Service run with Trinity Development and alumni to really give students a flavour of, you know, the types of roles of our alumni can go into, and that they can share their career journey experience. So I know we have a lot of alumni on this webinar. So if you are interested in joining us and becoming part of that alumni to student mentoring program, please reach out to either Careers or the alumni office and we can give you some more information about that. I think a lot of us, and Claire and Siobhán both alluded to it, I think a lot of us are taking this time to really look at our own values and what's important to us in our career and the type of culture that we want to work in. I think a lot of us, we start working from home, our roles have changed. A lot of us have maybe moved to different parts of the country while we're remote working, and it's making a lot of us really rethink about what career means to me. And I think it's very important that all of us individually reflect on that in terms of planning for our next career steps and our career journey ahead. I can't reinforce it enough about developing and updating our online presence. It's become very much key to how we work, getting used not only to the digital agility that we need now to work with all the different platforms, but also about our LinkedIn profiles, about, you know, if we're doing a CV, what that looks like online. So I very much would encourage everyone to very much look at their online presence and see how that's being used and how that's coming across from an employment perspective. We talked a lot about upskilling and reskilling, and I think there's a few questions there on that, so I'll come back to that, but very much using this time to look at sectors you're interested in going into, employers you might be interested in working with, and jobs you might be interested in getting involved in, and using this time to do research and prepare for that. We talked a good bit about well-being, and I think it's very important that we find and listen to our own voices at the moment when we're thinking about career development. Some of us would have had, you know, clear career development plans. I'm going to do X, I'm going to do Y, and that's going to lead to A, B, and C. And that's not quite what's happening at the moment. COVID has thrown this all up in the air. And maybe for some of us, it's time to actually just to pause and just to kind of really focus in on what we're doing now. You know, get used to new ways of working, get used to how we work with our teams or how we manage our teams. And it's a time maybe for, you know, maybe standing still a little bit and taking the time to reflect, to decide what direction we go in next. So I would very much be encouraging people to listen to your own voice and to really reflect on what really are the next steps you want to take in your career, and to think it is okay to stand still and take this time. I don't constantly happen to be doing a new course or doing a new skill. Maybe that's something I'll do in 2 months' time or 3 months' time, but do it with direction rather than saying, oh, everybody else seems to be upskilling, I better do it. So doing that. And then the last piece of advice, I suppose, is to be ready. There might be jobs that you might be interested in doing that just aren't there now, but they might be there in the future. So maybe just to prepare and to be ready. And just, I suppose, for a lot of you on this call, some of you are recent grads, that the Career Service in Trinity is fully open. We have online, we have a lot of resources available on our tcd.ie/careers that are openly available to many of you on this call. So please have a look at that, and we'll be able to hopefully find something there that is useful to you. So thanks to everyone for all of that, and to the two presenters for giving their input. I know there's been a lot of questions coming in, so I'm just going to kind of go through these quickly and maybe just put them out to Siobhán and Claire, and we can follow up on them. So the first one was really coming in about transitioning to new career areas. And Siobhán, I might ask you this about how open employers are to considering application from those coming from other sectors and looking transition to new sectors.
Yeah, so I would have said they were very open pre-COVID. I think because we were experiencing such, extreme talent shortages, However, I think in the current climate where people aren't in a situation where they can come into an office and learn from other colleagues and, get that transition happening in a very seamless, smooth, organized fashion, there's probably a little less openness to it, unfortunately, than there might have been previously. I think there's so many businesses that are in business survival mode at the moment, particularly across the whole SME world, that at this moment in time, if they have a recruitment need or a talent need, it has to exactly fit and match what they're looking for. And that's what we're seeing at the minute in CPL. And it does make it challenging for us when we're obviously trying to deliver a best-in-class service to our candidates sometimes who come to us, and there's no flexibility at all in terms of from the employer perspective on what they will and won't look at. So, it is certainly a little bit more tricky now in terms of that openness than we might have seen, where people would career change and pivot, and that would become incredibly common. And I do think it will happen again. I think we're just in a really strange kind of funny time at the minute where people just don't have the capacity to take on something that isn't exactly fitting their need right now.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things, and I know we work a lot with this in the career service, is really being able to articulate that well. And as you mentioned there about the move to the competency-based interviewing as well, and it's really about even using this time to get practice with that and actually to
exactly
in a way that works really well. And as you said, that the way the job specs are now, they're looking for more of an exact match than it might have been in the past. So it's very important that in your CV and your applications that
absolutely. Actually, you're so on the money there, Orla, because I think that's where people fall down in the first place. They don't have a tailored strategic approach to this. So expecting the employer to maybe give them a chance, or maybe frustrated that they haven't been called forward for interview based on a CV that doesn't sell by them, for this role convincingly enough. So I think it's that time and investment that you put into your CV is absolutely vital. And just back up what you said too, I think using your networking very carefully and thoughtfully now more than ever is crucial, because a lot of us will get our opportunities through people that we know. This climate more than ever. So I think that having a really good plan around this and using the supports that are around you, there's no shortage of resource that can help you through this. So don't feel to try and do this all by yourself. Ask for advice, reach out to people. You have a great service offering there. There's tons of stuff online. There's loads of resources, recruitment and partners like CPL. So I think there's lots you can do on this to nail it right, rather than going in kind of, cold without hoping that something that maybe hasn't been second checked by someone who's an expert, who could really nail it the first time out.
Okay. And one of the other questions that's there is about the use of technology in recruitment. We spoke about technology kind of invading everything that we do now, and recruitment is one of those areas where technology is really coming in. I suppose one of the things we see a lot now in the graduate recruitment space is the use of gaming, and we talked a little bit about video interviews and that now, but there's actually maybe the move to putting assessment centers online and all that type of thing. So I think the more experience people can get, and I know there's a lot of free resources out there of this. Are you seeing trends towards that now, Siobhán, more of a use of gamification and that in recruitment practices?
Yeah, probably with the gamification is probably more at the new entrants and the grad level. You don't tend to see as much of that for people who are experienced hires, to be honest. But I do think that we are seeing a huge amount of engagement in tools, applicant tracking systems they're called, and virtual technology tools to do video interviews that can be used to, I suppose, substitute in never having to go back to coming into the office face-to-face interview. And that's only the start of it, because I think in this climate where health and safety is the #1 priority, people are going to be looking at every step of the candidate journey and of the recruitment cycle, and looking at how they can automate things, how they can, put a technology solution around it. That had already been in motion, Orla, now pre-COVID anyways. So I think it will just accelerate in this climate. I think to be, make sure you're as tech adept as possible, embrace all these, tech tools in your way, because I think it's the way of the future.
One of the questions I've maybe put out to yourself, Claire, and it's something that I've been thinking about, is has the current situation opened up more opportunities in terms of diversity and equality of opportunity and access to employment? Do you feel that this has had an impact on that?
I think it should have an impact on that. I think it's perhaps a little bit early to maybe kind of say with any degree of certainty. And I think that's why actually having this conversation today at the 1st, 2nd, 3rd of September is quite important. Businesses, as Siobhan was saying, were very much focused on business continuity and keeping the show on the road, basically, and trying to service all their contracts that they had open at that particular point in time. They're now entering the phase for planning for 2021 and actually 2022. And this is going to be very important for the graduates who are in the audience this afternoon, because I would just be a little bit concerned that the message could be getting out there that, you know, things are closed off actually. And they're not. What they're just trying to do is their businesses' minds are just focused, perhaps, maybe, as I said, keeping that show on the road. Now they're entering that planning phase. And I think it's now we will probably see, maybe early 2021, where we will see those greater opportunities and that potential to open up. Their business will need people, like their pipelines are moving on, and they will still need to take in some degree, like hiring has, as Siobhan has said, has not stopped. It may have slowed, and there's going to be that kind of perfect match fit, matching of a kind of experience and expertise, competencies, skills with then the role that's on offer. But I do think the time is coming where we're not going to go back to the 5 days a week in the same office. Now people are probably thinking, well, I couldn't have done a job in Cork, for example, but I actually now could maybe do 2 days on the train to Cork per week. So I think you're probably going to see a little bit more of that blurring. But I think with any degree of kind of conviction, or it's probably too early to say right now. But I think that's something to bear in mind for many of particularly the new entrants into the labour market. Be flexible. One of my first jobs out of college was actually to work for a family-run SME, and 20 years on, it's still the company that I draw on a lot of my initial experiences, because it gave me such a great insight into how families run their businesses, how SMEs run their business. I got to see everything from the inputs to the outputs. I also think, you know, if you're thinking about accountancy, for example, traditionally you may have thought you had to join one of the big 4, big 5 finance companies. That's no longer the case. You might have thought if you wanted to work in the tech industry, you have to work with one of the born on the internet companies. No longer the case, because every industry needs those type of skills. So I think your point about being flexible, employers will become a little bit more flexible, but individuals will also have to become a little bit more flexible about the opportunities and being open to them, and seeing this as it's a bit of a cliche, but it's a bit of a stepping stone, particularly in the early stages of your career. And that's the key point. This is not the end before it even begins. You might just have to readjust what you thought you were going to have to do at the beginning of January, but you never know where that opportunity might lead you to. And I think that's the key message.
Okay. One of the other questions that's come in that I'm just very keen on, aware of the time, I just want to kind of finish up on a few of these. So just very quickly, Siobhan, throw one at you. How do you suggest getting past your overqualified objection from recruiters, potential employers?
Yeah, that's a really difficult one, all right. And it's one that it's an evergreen. I mean, I'm working in recruitment 20 years, and we would often have seen that all the years. And I think the important thing is to align why your experience is relevant to the role you've applied for and the reasoning why you want the role in the first place, and to anticipate that somebody might say that about your experience. So to nearly be ahead of it in your application or your application letter or whatever it is, to, you know, so don't leave it unanswered, because you'll only be frustrated that you missed out on that opportunity. So I would address it, you know, up front, so that the reasons why you want the role, why you for the role, and to be very clear in your proposition, what you're bringing to the employer. You know, it is tough at the moment for employers. They're so bombarded, I think, with applications that unless they have a good tech solution in place, a lot of them are not replying to the applications. We're hearing this a lot now, and it's causing a lot of frustration for somebody who's a job seeker, you know, because they're not hearing anything and they're thinking it's just a black hole and it's frustrating. So, you know, so there's no easy fix on this, but I think anticipating it, if you know that's going to be said, I hate to say it tends to happen a lot for more senior candidates who maybe are, you know, and kind of discriminatory a little bit, you know, maybe at that stage of their career, they don't want to be, you know, that senior level role. They're happy to take a step back, and, you know, so it's making sure that rationale is very clearly communicated.
Okay, thank you for that. And I suppose one of the other questions that's here is about someone who is, this is about, you mentioned, we talked a bit about competency-based interviews, but someone is saying that they've also heard this strengths-based interviewing is being used quite a lot. Are you seeing that coming back in your experience, Siobhán?
Not to a huge level yet, but I have been hearing about it. We're not seeing our clients engaging it with it hugely yet, but watch this space. I think in light of everything that has been thrown up this year, I think a lot of people are looking at everything they're doing and realigning processes. So I certainly would think that it might become a bigger trend over the next couple of years.
Yeah. Okay, and I suppose we might it's just coming up to 2 o'clock now, so I'm very aware of time. So I suppose maybe just to finish up, and I think it is important to note that for all of us, both for now and for the future, and for where our careers might go in the future, that it is very important to kind of reflect on, you know, what we've done and what we've all learned during this time. In 10 or 15 years time, we might have forgotten all about it, but it's actually very important that we kind of reflect on our learning from now, and that we include that in CVs for the future. And I think maybe that's something over the next year or two. It's an action, a call to action for all of us, is to look at our own CVs and to think about how we've evolved during this stage, and how we've personally developed, and the skill set we've developed, and how that's going to inform our ability to kind of maybe transition in our careers, get promoted, and will help our own career development in the future. So on that note, I would just like to extend my thanks to Claire and Siobhán for joining us and sharing their thoughts and insight with us today. And also like to thank Susanna and her team for facilitating us on today's webinar. Thanks very much.
Thank you, everybody, for participating and listening in today to our webinar. Really a lot of fantastic information that Orla, Claire, and Siobhán have shared. We've put those links that they were mentioning on the YouTube channel. And in addition, you can also see below here on the screen, again, where you can find information either on TCD Careers for IBEC and CPL. And I did also just want to mention, Orla had talked about the alumni to student mentoring program that we run. We also have this platform that is available for alumni to mentor alumni as well. So if you do go onto Trinity Alumni Online, trinity.illuminate.net, you can actually look for mentors as well. So please take advantage of that resource. So again, thank you so much to the speakers, really excellent information. Thank you to all of you who have been listening in today and asking questions. And thank you to the team in the background, in particular, Alex, who has helped to make this webinar happen. If you do have questions about this webinar or any other webinars in our series, please email us at alumni@tcd.ie. Our next webinar in this series is in 2 weeks' time on September 16th at 4 p.m. And it is with Professor Roseanne Kenny from Trinity, as she will be speaking about secrets to successful aging in a COVID-19 world. So in the meantime, please stay safe, and we look forward to meeting you back in 2 weeks' time. Thank you.